The various perspectives and views on the self can be best seen and understood by examining the ideas of some of the greatest thinkers from the ancient period to the modern times. I invite all of you now to journey with me as we revisit and identify the most important postulates they made. At the end of this lesson, you are expected to compare and contrast how the self has been represented in different perspectives. The self according to David Hume. In epistemology, he questioned common notions of personal identity and argued that there is no permanent self that continues over time. This idea can be formulated as the following arguments. All ideas and knowledge about the persisting self are ultimately derived from impressions. But no impression is a persisting thing. Therefore, there cannot be any persisting idea of self. Again, the idea or knowledge of self must be a constant, persisting, stable thing. But all ideas and knowledge is derived from impressions which are transient, non-persisting, variable things. It follows that we do not really have knowledge of a self. Categorically speaking, there is no self. Gilbert Ryle attacked Descartes, Plato's and Freud's idea of a dualistic metaphysics of mind and body, a theory which views the mind and body as two radically different aspects of the self. He decided to focus on the observable behavior of self by ignoring or denying the existence of an internal non-physical self. No more inner selves, immortal souls, states of consciousness, or unconsciousness entities. He defined self as the behavior that is presented to the world, a view that is known today as behaviorism. According to Immanuel Kant, we all have an inner and outer self which together form our consciousness. The inner self is comprised of our psychological state and rational intellect. The outer self includes our senses and the physical world. When speaking of the inner self, there is apperception. Apperception is how we mentally assimilate a new idea into old ones. According to Kant, representation occurs through our senses. It is mental imagery based on past sensations and experiences. According to John Locke, the self is a thinking, intelligent being that has reason and reflection. The self considers itself as itself. The self is the same thinking thing in different times and places, and continues to define personal identity as the sameness of a rational being. As long as one is the same self and the same rational being, one has the same personal identity. Nimbalkar, 2011. John Locke holds that personal identity is a matter of psychological continuity. He considered personal identity, or the self, to be founded on consciousness or memory, not on the substance of either the soul or the body. According to Merleau-Ponty, the mind is part of the body and the body is part of the mind. We may have some sort of standalone mental faculty that perceives, but it needs the body to communicate with the world. It needs the body to act on its perceptions. He argued that the body is not just an object that imprisons the mind. It is a subject. It is not just a slave to mind's consciousness. It is part of consciousness. The perceptions of the mind and the actions of the body are unified as one. In Phenomenology of Perception, he wrote, "Inside and outside are inseparable. The world is wholly inside, and I am wholly outside of myself." To sum it up, his work asserts that self and perception are encompassed in a physical body. Therefore, the physical body is a part of self. Patricia views the self as the brain. She argued that the more we know about the brain, the clearer it becomes that the brain is each of us. She also argued that there is no mind beyond the brain, no self and no soul beyond it. In her book, Touching the Nerve, The Self as Brain, she stated that, "My brain and I are inseparable. I am who I am, because my brain is what it is. Even so, I often think about my brain in terms different from those I use when thinking about myself. I think about my brain as that, and about myself as me. I think about my brains as having neurons. But I think of me as having a memory. Still, I know that my memory is all about the neurons in my brain. Lately, I think about my brain in more intimate terms. As me." Plato, like Descartes, believes that persons are immaterial souls or pure egos. On this view, persons have bodies only contingently, not necessarily. So they can live after bodily death. According to him, a person's inner life or soul has three distinct elements: the appetite, the spirited or hot-blooded part, and the mind. Plato's three elements of the psyche are: 1. The appetite. It includes all our myriad desires for various pleasures, comforts, physical satisfactions, and bodily ease. 2. The spirited or hot-blooded part. It is the part that gets angry when it perceives, for example, an injustice being done. In other words, it is the element of the soul responsible for our emotions. 3. The mind, nous. It is the part that thinks, analyzes, looks ahead, rationally weighs options, and tries to gauge what is best and truest overall. In his work, Meditations on First Philosophy, Descartes discussed dualism. Dualism is the theory which states that reality or existence is divided into two parts. When speaking of humanity, dualism asserts that the mind is separate from the body. With its ties to dualism, Descartes believed the mind is the seat of our consciousness. Because it houses our drives, intellect, and passions, it gives us our identity and our sense of self. Sigmund Freud postulated that there are three layers of self within us all: the id, ego, and superego. According to Freud, it is the first part of the self to develop. It is the seat of all our desires and wants. Rather than dealing rationally or logically, the id exists to express urges it wants to see filled. Context has no meaning. The goal of the id is to have urges and desires met. Differing from the id, ego is the part of us that deals in reality. The ego regulates how many of the id's urges will be expressed or met. The ego is able to discern what is right or wrong based on context. Last is the superego. The superego seeks to attain the ideal of a perfect ego. However, The superego is irrational in its idea and pursuit of perfection. Believing that the superego is formed by our parents and even religion, Freud asserted that the superego can be rigid and punishing. Due to the stringency of superego and the waywardness of the id, a healthy ego acts as a regulator of both. In Latin, Saint Augustine of Hippo wrote, Noverim te, noverim me. In English it is translated as, May I know you God, may I know myself. Saint Augustine wrote these words in one of his earliest works, but it retained its force throughout the time. He believed that the self can only be truly discovered through recognition of God's love and man's response to that love. Saint Thomas Aquinas, the most eminent 13th-century scholar and stalwart of medieval philosophy, adapted some ideas of Aristotle. Aquinas said that indeed, man is composed of two parts, matter and form. Matter, or hyli in Greek, refers to the common stuff that makes up everything in the universe. Man's body is a part of this matter. Form, on the other hand, or morphe in Greek, refers to the essence of a substance or thing. It is what makes it what it is. In the case of the human person, the body of the human person is something that he shares even with animals. The cells in a human body is the same as the cells of any other living organism. However, what makes a human person is his soul, which is his essence. To Aquinas, just as in Aristotle, the soul is what animates the body. It is what makes us human. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed our short journey to the greatest minds the humanity has ever seen. Thank you for Sir Orley. Thank you for being with me. Let us always pray for the end of this pandemic. Stay safe always. This is the voice of Julie. Good day.